question. Hey Kim, great work as always. A lot of people in the astrology community are making a big deal about Pluto going into Aquarius. Saint Germain and the other masters also talk a lot about the age of Aquarius through you, which is also an astrology thing. How important then is astrology? Well, let me first make a correction here. There is astronomy and there's astrology. Astronomy is the movement of the heavenly bodies from a scientific perspective. And then astrology is something that looks at the movements of the heavenly bodies and relates it to our situation here on Earth, giving it a certain meaning. And saying that the planet is moving from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius is not astrology only. I mean, it is of course used in astrology, but it's actually astronomical in the sense that there's a certain, when you look at the night sky, there's a certain precession of what's called the equinoxes. And this is simply purely astronomy. I mean, this is how the heavenly bodies move in relation to our viewpoint here on Earth. And we are moving from the sign Pisces into the sign Aquarius, being the primary sign above us as they determine it in astronomy. So it isn't completely astrological to say this. In other words, what I'm trying to say is you can talk about moving from Pisces to Aquarius without talking about astrology. You're simply talking about there are certain phases in the Earth and there are different energies being released. This is not an astrological thing, it's from the spiritual realm, from the ascended realm. New kinds of energies are being released in the Aquarian age. It's not something that's predetermined by astrological configurations. It's something the masters choose to do as we are moving into a new cycle. And so it's always, what the masters are releasing is always calibrated to the response that people have, to the collective consciousness. So, how important is astrology? Well, that is for you to determine individually. I know people who have been on the spiritual path for many decades, several decades, and who have been into astrology the whole time, who are still into astrology, and who are very much using astrology in a way that they feel enhances their spiritual growth. So, obviously, there's a wide range of how people use astrology. So, there are some that are more mature than others. So what I'm trying to say is that I can fully respect that there are people who use astrology, who feel it enhances their spiritual growth, who feels that by looking at a person's astrology, it can tell them something about their psychology, for example, what they need to work on, what challenges they have in this lifetime, and by looking at specific configurations as they change throughout life, they can say, you're now working on this particular challenge, and therefore you need to pay attention to this. So I can respect that. I don't do that myself because I have never been intuitively pulled into looking at astrology or using astrology. And I'm not in any way trying to say that this is better or that this is the way you should be doing it. I'm not trying to say that at all. It's just I've always followed my intuition, and for me, astrology has just never had a pull on me. I've never been pulled intuitively into using it or looking into it. But again, that doesn't say anything about what you should be doing. I have been working with the Ascended Masters since 2002. And I don't think they've hardly at all talked about astrology through me in all of the almost 1,000 dictations I've taken, and many more questions and answers. But in the previous dispensation called the Summit Lighthouse, the messenger was very much into astrology and used astrology for all kinds of things. So again, I'm not trying to say that my way is better. I'm just saying, personally, I have never felt an intuitive pull into it. And I will say also, when you look at people out there and how they use astrology, you can see a certain range, and you can see that people usually, as they grow older on the path, they mature. Because I think back to when I was new on the path, and from the moment I found my first spiritual movement when I was 18, some people were really heavily into astrology. And they would use it in such a way that they were trying to predict what was going to happen to them. I mean, physical, concrete things. For example, you're going to make a decision. Should I take this job or look for another job? So then you look at your astrology, and based on your astrology, you decide, I'm going to take this job. Or should I start a relationship with this person or shouldn't I? You look at your astrology, you look at the other person's astrology, and based on this, you make a decision. And to me, what I have observed is that many people who make these kind of decisions, they get disappointed. Because sometimes it doesn't work out the way they were hoping, based on the astrological predictions. So what I have observed over the years is that people usually grow out of this wanting to use astrology to make predictions. You can also see many people, when they're new on the spiritual path, they go to psychics when they have to make a decision. They try to get some kind of psychic reading, for example. Or they use tarot cards, or they use other kinds of what I would call divination, where you try to use some kind of outer thing to tell you what you should choose. And so, in my observation, most people, when they grow older on the path, when they increase their intuition, they start just making decisions based on their intuition, not on some outer portents, whether it's astrology or something else. So in my view, you can come to a point where you're not looking at any outer conditions to tell you what to decide. You are using your own intuition, your own rational mind, and making decisions based on that. So, but again, I'm not saying that you can't then transition into another use of astrology where you look at it more as a tool to get insights into your psychology. And that can be perfectly valid to do that. Now again, when it comes to astrology, I'm speaking from ignorance because I haven't used it. As I said, it's not an outer rational decision. It's just intuitive. I haven't been led into looking into it. So there's a lot of things I don't know about astrology. So I'm sure that people who are astrologers will reason or argue and say, but you don't understand this and you don't understand that. And I'm freely admitting I don't understand the intricacies of astrology, and therefore I could be dismissive in an unreasonable way because I don't understand it. But on the other hand, I'm also saying I am a spiritual person, and that means I'm an intuitive person. And it means two things. First of all, the whole goal of my spiritual path is to increase my connection with my higher self, which is what I call intuition. So I get intuitive insights from my higher self. Second of all, my goal is to take control over my own state of mind, take responsibility for my own decisions. So I'm not saying, well, I made that decision because Pluto was in Aquarius. I made that decision because I chose to make that decision. And I am responsible for it, and if I don't like the consequences, I look at what was the psychology. Do I have some kind of subconscious selves that caused me to make this decision? And then I change that. That's just my approach to spirituality.